Ah, Smite Dragons. Quite awesome, aren't they? From the jumpy powers of Wukong, the I don't want to die super glory of Fafnir, or just the I kill you burst of Kukulcan. But they're actually quite different beings individually and culturally. You see, in Mayan culture, dragons, or specifically Kukulcan, quite a respected being. He's the god of wind, rains, learning, science, agriculture, arts, and the patron deity of merchants and priests. He also took on a human form as well as his serpentine form, and the Aztecs also worshipped him. When they did, he was called Quetzalcoatl. Aztec worshippers, Mayan worshippers, very similar in this regard. Kind of think of them to be the kind of relationship you'd have between the Romans and the Greek as far as the gods themselves. They shared very similar gods. Mayans came after the Aztecs. Quetzalcoatl and his brother, Tez, created the entire cosmos. And if I try to actually pronounce Tez's full name, bad things will happen to both of our ears. So I'm doing you a real favor there. They created the Earth, but when they did this, they kind of disturbed another creature, and by disturbed, I mean killed, and used its body in a very similar fashion to how Odin and his brothers used Ymir's body to fashion the Earth. Except Ymir didn't turn into a spirit after this and cause a bit of destruction and protest, but, you know, Mayan. The brothers also battled quite a lot, and they were quite famous for doing so. During their battles, a little bit of their work would be destroyed, you know, a planet here, a bit of the cosmos there, but it was all repaired in the end, so it was all good. And Kukulcan also could assume the form of the planet Venus. Quite interesting to know. Ultimately, though, Aztec priests would use the title Quetzalcoatl for their top tiers of priests, and it was a great honor to receive this title. Additionally, Kukulcan was adored by the people as a sort of life-giver. You see, this one time, Kukulcan's parents asked him to go down to the underworld to retrieve some bones. Kukulcan wasn't exactly the most enthusiastic son in the world to have to go and retrieve these bones, but he decided to spice things up whilst he was down there and trick the gods of the underworld, who were very respectful to him, which then kind of swiftly faded when they realized that Kukulcan tried to dupe them with bones. So they dug a pitfall trap, and when Kukulcan fell down that pit, he was scared as all hell. Hoping that his feathers weren't getting dirty, he eventually got out of the pit and even retrieved the bones, but he had to apologize to the gods of the underworld. So, yeah. When he finally did bring the bones to his parents, he also had to offer some of his blood to bring the bones to life, and these eventually became people. So, that's cool. He's very much a created deity in that sense. Thanks to these things, Kukulcan was very much respected in Mayan, Quetzalcoatl, if you will, was respected in Aztec. If there were ever a god ranking, Kukulcan would definitely be up there. See, the people greatly respected him. The gods gave him a fair baseline level of respect, but if he tried to trick them, disrespect them in any way, they'd show him, hey, we're gods too, but ultimately, he had a pretty sweet deal. Quite similar to this look on the dragon gods, the Chinese. They definitely respected their reptilian, flying, majestic creatures. In Chinese mythology, there are typically 5 really well-known examples of the dragons. You've got Gong Gong, who thought he was this awesome creature of massive power and kind of got put in his place. And then you've got the Dragon Kings. Ao Kuang, the Azure Dragon, the Red Dragon, Ao Qin, the White Dragon, Ao Run, and the Black Dragon, Ao Shun. They all had their own plot of water that they kind of looked over, and the people near them offered sacrifices, tributes, things of that nature to kind of honor and respect the gods. The people held these dragons in very high regard, and thanked them for the rainfall, the lack of floods and tsunamis that would grace their cities, and towns, villages, etc. It was a pretty nice relationship. But for Ao Kuang, he was being tested by the people. You see, their requests of him grew ever bolder, and this one time, this glorious chap asked for usage of Ao Kuang's very palace. Because of these growing demands, Ao Kuang decided, I need more tributes and better things than what you're giving me, so he asked the people to up the ante. When they couldn't meet his demands, he kind of limited the rainfall in his area, and the people were sad. So Najar ended up having to kill his son and beat Ao Kuang into submission to then resume the rainfall. This made Ao Kuang pretty grumpy. In fact, Ao Kuang's probably the grumpiest dragon god in Chinese mythology. Possibly Gong Gong could have been equally mad when he was defeated, but Gong Gong caused a lot of problems when he was defeated during his battle. He kind of shattered a very important pillar that held up the heavens, and as I covered in Nua's video, that Gong Gong. Yeah. Troublesome. But the dragons were these long, massive sea serpents, far bigger than a regular human. They may have had goat antlers protruding from the backs of their heads, or the tops of their heads rather, and they were covered in scales, typically fish scales. Now, as far as limbs, they had 4. 2 where you'd expect legs to be, and 2 where you'd expect arms to be. On these arms and legs, there were claws. Typically 4, but sometimes 5. And of course, the different colored dragons, as I went over before, Ao Kuang being the Azure, or he could have been blue or green, but Azure Dragon. Ao Kuang specifically, as his in-game title suggests, resided over the eastern seas, and he was the essence of spring. Al Quin being the essence of summer, and the South Sea is what he kind of commanded over. Al Run was the essence of autumn, and he resided over the West Seas, leaving the Black Dragon, who was actually the most mysterious, but not in Smite, the essence of winter and the North Sea. Ao Kuang had the largest realm of sea that he lived in. He literally lived within the Eastern Sea, but Al Shun, for example, lived in the Lake Baikai. I apologize if I butchered that pronunciation, but it is what it is. So yeah, quite different and respected. Of course, again, there are deities that have shamed them. Najar brought Ao Kuang great shame because Najar was a child when he defeated Ao Kuang, so that must not have been the best look. I'm sure the other dragons gave Ao Kuang a hard time about that. This next one varies. Sun Wukong. See, getting beat up by Sun Wukong isn't exactly shameful, because the only person who could truly test Sun Wukong were either the Jade Emperor himself, who's supposed to be the strongest and most supreme deity in Chinese mythology, and Erlong Shen, one of the Emperor's most respected and top generals. And it wasn't easy for Erlong Shen either. It was a very grueling and long battle. Stood up by Sun Wukong, if that's the myth that you want to go with, isn't dishonorable by any means, but it doesn't mean Ao Kuang wouldn't be any madder because of it. Or, there is a variation. Sun Wukong visited the palace of Ao Kuang and left with a weapon. This weapon was used by a prior king to help his people. Now, Sun Wukong, when he took the weapon, Ao Kuang was either very mad, but couldn't do anything because Sun Wukong's like this super OP beast in Chinese mythology, or Ao Kuang was quite relieved because this weapon was taking up space and really didn't work with his glorious water palace. So, yeah, he was quite glad that Sun Wukong took it. So ultimately, Ao Kuang was the moodiest of all the dragons, but typically the dragons were quite respected in Chinese mythology and worshipped accordingly. Not the case in Norse mythology. You see, Fafnir was a bit of a dick. That's not just an in-game personality that Hyros decided to throw in there for the lols. Fafnir killed his father for gold, because he was that greedy. And as punishment, he was turned into a dragon because the gold in and of itself was cursed, which is a bit spiteful on Odin's part, because the whole reason why his father was given the gold is because the gods have accidentally killed one of Fafnir's father's sons, or Fafnir's brother, I suppose. And you're probably wondering why I'm not saying Fafnir's father's name. Well, I didn't look up how to pronounce it, and I don't want to butcher it, because I will butcher it awfully. With Fafnir's father dead, Fafnir, of course, inherited all of this wealth, but turned into a dragon. Now, the sad part is he spent most of his time guarding all of this wealth. Didn't really spend it all that much, just kind of in a cave full of gold. And because he's a dragon, no one wanted to mess with him, because it's a dragon. But this is Norse mythology. You've got a bunch of people wanting to prove themselves, or just do some sort of memorable heroic deed. The man that did it this time was Sigurd, and after a fairly arduous battle, beheaded Fafnir, and he was also told that Fafnir wasn't going to necessarily harm him if he asked for a bit. The person who told him this was also killed. Because, you see, he kills Fafnir, then he eats a part of Fafnir, and this part of Fafnir that he eats granted him the ability to communicate with birds, and the birds told him that he was tricked, so he wasn't too happy. I don't advise that you actually try to eat a dragon, though I have no idea what would happen to you, and would it even taste good? Is that something that people try? So moving on to Hinduism, much like Norse mythology, people saw the dragons as something to be feared, and it was a great honor to be known as someone who could have slain one of these very dangerous beasts. But Norse dragons, they're your typical, stereotypical image of a Western dragon, you know, massive creature that looks like a bit like a Komodo dragon, but with a very dangerous looking mouth, breathing fire, giant wingspan, walking on all four appendages, long tail, and scales. That kind of dragon. In Hinduism, the dragons were serpentine creatures, more akin to snakes, but they actually were a bit more like Greek hydras. Multiple heads, 7 to 9 usually, very, very dangerous creatures, and most being venomous as well as an added kick. The Hindu hero Rostam actually ended up having to fight one of these beasts, and the beast that he fought could turn invisible. If it wasn't for Rostam's horse, he'd probably be dead. You see, as this dragon crept up on Rostam's horse would try to wake him up to tell him, "This dragon is going to eat you." And Rostam couldn't see the dragon because every time he woke up to try and see the dragon would turn itself invisible. So Rostam would go back asleep, and the dragon would creep ever forward until it got oh so close, and Rostam woke up and drew his sword. After a bit of a battle, with his horse at his side, Rostam beheaded the dragon. And that was that. The unique thing about this dragon, though, is it was very, very similar to Chinese dragons. So, 4 limbs, 3 claws on each, rather than 4 to 5 claws on each. And of course the whole invincibility thing, because invisibility is always fun. Just ask Loki. So, yeah. Whilst the people would have been afraid of the dragons, the gods not nearly as much, especially Callie. I'm sure Callie would have eaten dragons for breakfast or something. She's really something else. But, yeah. Well, that's the video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did and feel like I've earned it, then go ahead and leave it a like. It helps me out and motivates me to make more and better content. So tell me what you think about the videos unscripted. Are they better? Worse? Should I just go back to swearing by a script and never going away from it? Be really interested to know what you think about that. If you're new to the channel, then why not subscribe? There's plenty more content like this coming on its way. And I think I'll also get back on track with I think Sun Wukong was perhaps next. Might make a video about him. If not, then maybe Shibalanke or Terra, I think. We'll see. We'll see next week. Either way, thank you very, very much for watching. I've been Prime, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.